Hi, I'm Tara from Marathon Mates. On this episode, we are going to talk to local Brisbane running legend, Phil Hungerford. Phil is widely known within the Brisbane running community, having been involved in the running industry for many, many years. On this episode, we will talk to Phil about his running journey, his ownership of one of Brisbane's best running shops, and how he got into organising and directing run events. Are you ready to run? Let's go.
Welcome to the thrilling world of the Flying RuNR, brought to you by the Marathon Mates.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode number 60 of the Flying RuNR podcast. On this episode, we're joined by our good friend and fellow runner, Phil Hungerford. Phil has been a long-term staple of the Brisbane running community, having been the owner of the RunIn, one of Brisbane's first running stores. Along with the running store, Phil has owned and directed a number of running events. On this episode, we will talk to Phil about his running journey and the places it has taken him. Phil, welcome to the Flying RuNR.
Thank you, guys. Nice to be here.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on and joining us. And as usual, I'm joined by my marathon mates, Tony and Tim, and Lucia this week as well. So that's great. Welcome, guys. How were your runs and what have you been doing for the last week or so? Tony? Whether you want to or not.
Yeah, that's all right. Sharon and I went out and ran 15K on Saturday. So that was the first time we've run together and the first time in a couple of weeks that we actually ran. So as you know, I've had a bit of a calf twinge and Sharon's got bursitis in her feet. But we've both come out of it okay, I guess. Just going straight to 15 may not have been the wisest thing we've ever done. But yeah, it's a good start. So I felt good. That was about it for us. Just did our normal walking up until then. And as from tomorrow, I guess we start running midweek again and we'll go from there. But yeah, a bit of a boring week for us. What about you, Lucia?
I attempted a long run, which in my current training was 15K. So I was happy with that. So I figure with Sydney coming up in 4 weeks, I may need to up it next week. So I'm probably going to do what no one listening to this podcast should do. I'm increasing my distance dramatically next week. So the plan next week is to go to 30Ks.
Yeah,
I know.
That is a little dramatic, isn't it? That's like double.
Yeah, and we know I don't do things logically either, but it won't be pretty, but it will get done because I think mentally I just have to get the one run of having at least 1-3 in it for Sydney. So yeah, but listeners, don't chuck a meet and don't double your distance in 1 week. I don't advise it. So next week we'll see how we go. So, but overall, not too bad. Tim, what about you?
Lucia, you're also a seasoned marathoner who's run numerous marathons. You know your body, you know what you're capable of, and you have a fairly strong foundation as well from ongoing constant running. So whilst it might seem a little bit crazy to go more than the 10% increase that is recommended by people, if you're careful and look after yourself and just take it easy, you should be okay.
Exactly. It'll be very nice and easy, I can assure you of that.
That's it. For Team Ellis, Tara, we did the main beach park run down the Gold Coast, Australia's very first ever park run. It's not the first time we've done that one, but it's the first time in probably 8 or 9 years that we've been there and done that one. Lovely little track. You start off on main beach there, and then it's sort of a little bit on concrete path, a little bit through the back of the sand dunes there, a little bit of rolling hills and gravel as well. We incorporated our long run into that park run because we were down the Gold Coast for the weekend anyway. So started off with 12Ks to start with, then park run, and then I finished it off with another couple of Ks afterwards. So, all up close to that 21Ks, which is where we want to be. But yeah, starting to get back into the groove. I did a lot more running midweek last week, which is something that I've been looking to do because I haven't been feeling well for the last sort of 5 or 6 weeks since Gold Coast, and I felt bloody good getting back out there on the midweek runs, doing the things I need to do, the stretching, the strength work during the week, the extra distance on the weekdays. It just makes you feel mentally so much better when you can get back into it and when you can actually feel good about yourself doing it. So Tony, I feel for you, but if you're getting back into it again this week or so, I really can understand. It'll make everyone, it'll make you feel better. It really does.
It certainly does. It was something I was really looking forward to running, and sometimes it's the simple joys that just get you through. So really looked forward to getting 15. Lucia, we are also doing a little bit of extra distance this week. I'm hoping to get a 20K out on Friday night because we've got a wedding on Saturday. So, of course, I don't want to be going to a wedding with too much pain in the leg. So we'll try and knock that out on Friday night. And I think I'm going to be happy doing a 20 or a 21 prior to Sydney at the moment. So Sydney's just a bit of a training run, and I know that sounds a bit silly having a marathon as a training run, but that's the only way we can look at Sydney. So
yep, and that's fine. We've spoken about that before. As long as you take it easy and you treat it as a training run and listen to your body, you got 7 hours to get through it on the day. So you just take your time and enjoy the sights of Sydney and build up that leg strength.
100%.
And Tim also forgot to mention that we did a 6K run to Century Cove on Sunday as well. So
yeah, just
that was my
6Ks.
highlight. Well, I actually ran that comfortably for a change. So yeah. Anyway, thanks guys. Now that it's that time of the week where we will talk about the news. Awesome. Tim, what's been happening around the world of running over the past few days?
Oh, well, I think last week when we did the podcast, we were talking about the women's marathon at the Olympics, and we were halfway through the race when we left it there, or close enough to it. And I think when we left, we were running out of the doors to get down into our TV rooms and put our feet up because Jess Stenson had hit the lead, and her and Jen Gregson were controlling the pace right through the halfway point, and it was great to see Aussies in front at the halfway point. But I guess the most exciting thing was the finish there. The final couple of kilometres, there was 5 runners left. It then became 4 runners with about 2Ks to go, and then 3 runners with about a kilometre to go. Asafa, who holds the world record, Hassan, who'd run the 5 and the 10,000, and Helen Abiri in that final 3 pack. And I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they managed to do it, but it was a sprint finish and a lot of pushing and shoving. I'm sure some of those hits in that sprint probably would get you 2 or 3 weeks in the NRL or the AFL nowadays, but they managed to fight it out to the end. And the great Safan Hassan, Tony, I know you love Safan Hassan, and I guess she's demonstrated very much why she loves that, why you love her so much in that running space. She not only received bronze in the 5,000 and the 10,000, but to receive a gold in the marathon less than 48 hours after winning a bronze in the 10,000 is just phenomenal. So, pretty awesome. What were your thoughts on it, Tony?
That was just an amazing race. And when I listened back to the episode and we're talking about Safan being in 40th position or, kicking through the early stages, and, we're sort of surmising in some respects that maybe the legs were a bit heavy, and then to see that final kick was just incredible. She is just a phenomenal athlete. And I think she's a little bit crazy, just quietly, because she just keeps putting herself in these amazing positions. And it was interesting. I was listening to some of the news surrounding the event, and Helen Abiri was quoted as saying she went out early to try and break Hassan and Asifa earlier than what she wanted to, because she wanted to try and nullify Hassan's kick at the end. And needless to say, Iberi was the first of the big three that sort of dropped towards the end. So, but that was her strategy. I thought the bump was interesting. I'll call it a bump. I won't call it a
racing incident.
Yeah, Sam was going. There was space there. Sam was going for the inside line, and Asefa was trying to go the shortest route. Is the way I look at it. So it was a decent bump, but a phenomenal lady. But what I loved about the marathon was last place was a lady called Kinzang Lamo from Bhutan, and 3 hours 52:59, the slowest time ever for an Olympic marathon, I believe. But the heartwarming scenes of people, because I think she walked much of the last 2Ks, and the crowd was just walking with her and running with her, and the cheers she got as she came down that final stretch was just, that's what the running community is all about. It's, yes, we were thrilled at the excitement of the first and second scenario in that home straight, but to hear those cheers for Lamo was just amazing. So phenomenal. So and just while we're still talking about the marathon, I've heard a couple of podcasts which I found really quite interesting. A big shout out. I heard Andy Buchanan being interviewed by Brett Robinson on For the Kudos podcast, and he was talking through the marathon on his perspective, and it was interesting when he was coming up on Kipchoge as Kipchoge was coming back, and he was just saying, "Oh, there's a Kenyan top in front." He had no idea it was going to be Kipchoge, and so it was the first time he'd raced Kipchoge, and he's saying, "Well, I'm 1 and Kipchoge's 0." So, which is a nice way to think about it. But it was really cool listening to the marathon from someone that had run it. And one of the big things he did after the race was go and talk to the girls who were doing their pre-marathon check-in, and he gave them a little bit of an insight. But the other thing I found interesting, and I'm going to do a shout out to Team Australia in the marathon in a sec, but the girls, Jess and Jen, when they hit the front, from all reports, it was because they thought the pace was too slow. The girls were just dawdling. So they said, someone's got to set the pace. So they did. And, you know, that's a truly an Australian thing to do, I think. So, but a big shout out to Pat Tiernan, who came 24th in the men in a time of 2:10. Andy Buchanan came 45th. He was the slowest. He had the slowest time of everyone running in that race. So, and an amazing effort of 45th, and Liam Adams came 49th in 2:13, and our girls did us so proud. Jess Stenson 13th in 2:26:45, and Jen Gregson 24th in 2:29. So an amazing effort from all the Australians.
Yep, and I'm going to ask you quickly, Phil, because I know you've been a race director on bigger races and also official. What was your take on the bump? Was it legal, or was there something in there that may have been wrong?
No, I don't think anything wrong with it at all. They were racing for the finishing line, and there was no question in my mind. They just bumped into each other, and they were both aiming at the same thing, the gold medal. And realistically, they didn't do anything wrong. I wouldn't have said anything to them. And it comes to say that there was no protests or anything. So really, the two girls shook hands afterwards. So it was no real problems, and I didn't see it a problem. You know, I mean, there's been other races where that sort of thing's gone on, but not quite as on the world stage as we would see it. That's for sure. You know? But I don't think there's a problem with it. I think just racing.
More of it, we say.
Well, yeah. I mean, when we were younger, we raced harder than that a couple of times. Yeah, so.
Sounds like footy.
Well, I think it was our friend Kim Tudgman who said it was great to see racing rather than pacing. And generally, for a lot of
I'd always watch a major medal marathon where they're racing for the medal, not racing to get the time. It's an actual race. If they run fast, it's great, but if they don't run fast, it's tactical. You know, we saw that in Los Angeles with Deke, and, you know, when he was more worried about the heat than the actual race. He wanted to win the gold medal, but he was looking after himself, and the others decided to go for it, and they did. And tactics beat him, you know, at the end of the day.
I'll carry on with the news. All right. So the other news was from the female marathon at the Olympics as well. Rose Harvey, who is a Team Great Britain marathon runner, completed the grueling event at the Paris Olympics. Welcome back, Phil. And she completed it in under 3 hours, despite sustaining a broken leg during the marathon. She ran to finish 78th overall with a time of 2 hours 51. She said it became clear to her at about 2 miles into the race that her hip, which had begun feeling tight 3 weeks previously, was going to be really pretty painful. She ended up crossing the line with a stress fracture in a femur, which is her main bone down the leg. So she said the hills didn't help at all. The downhills were just agony, and it just got worse and worse from there. So we all know marathoners are crazy people, but that is bloody tough to run a marathon from 2 miles out all the way through with a stress fracture in your femur. No, that is tough news.
Some history in that area. A bloke named Steve Monaghetti in Moscow finished with a stress fracture in his leg. Not many people do that one, but Steve finished with a stress fracture. So in the tibia, the same place actually.
Yeah, crazy, hey.
Yeah.
And Tony, you got some news on Kipchoge?
Yeah, once again, I must have been catch-up time for podcasts over the weekend, but on Believe in the Run, I mean, I can't wait for the next Olympics because the Flying Runners should be in a position where we are sent to the Olympics, like all these other podcasts are. So fingers crossed, hey? But Meg on Believe in the Run was talking about Kipchoge, and when he made the decision to stop, he stayed on course until every runner had passed him because he was encouraging them. So cheering them on and encouraging them. And it was only when the last runner passed him that he walked off the course. So that's why he's the GOAT, I think, in everyone's eyes. You know, it wasn't his day, but he made sure that he hung around to cheer those on as they went past him, because there would have been something really huge for those runners too, to see Kipchoge there just standing there in the side of the road. So he's the GOAT.
Gets even better. He handed his shoes to a member, to a kid in the crowd as well, from what I heard.
Amazing, yeah.
And I think Singlet as well. I read.
Yeah, yeah.
Singlet as well. Say Lucia. Oh wow.
Yeah. So somebody who really cares about giving back, that's for sure. Now, quickly before we move on to the main show, which is Phil, New York Marathon. I know, Tony, you're doing it. Tara, you're doing it, and I'm doing it. They've just started releasing their clothing range, and Tony, I know you love looking at colorways and you like looking at all the merch. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on the initial release of the clothing and the colors at this stage.
There's a lot of it. That's my first thought. I've never seen such a huge range of major marathon clothing. But yeah, I'm already made my choices, I guess. And you know, when we ran New York in 2018, there was plenty of clothes and items available at the expo. So I'm hoping that stands true, that there'll be plenty of items left in the expo. So but yeah, we've sort of, I like it. It's a little bit different. I think some of the shirt designs are not necessarily the old standout sort of NYC marathon type shirts, but I like it. So your thoughts?
The two different colors of jackets is going to be interesting. Do you buy one jacket or both jackets? Because there's two different colors. There's a pink version, which looks like the London 2022 color, and then there's a greeny teal color, which looks like the Berlin 2023 color. So do you go one color or do you go both colors? I guess that's the interesting thing. You know how people get excited about the jackets. So
and it doesn't have Bank of America on it.
Or a unicorn facing the wrong way.
just a massive New Balance logo instead.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you do? What would you do, Lucia? One jacket or two jackets?
This may surprise you all. I'd go one.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're a jacket hoarder too. It's
No,
just like
let's
Tony
face
and
it.
Tara.
I'm a merchandise hoarder because when I did New York in 2016, I don't know if you guys know this story, but I actually brought a foldable shopping trolley with me because I knew I'd be buying that much merchandise.
Holy dooly.
But surprisingly, I didn't pack. Well, I brought it with me to the expo, but I used it because I had it there, but I did buy a lot. Tara's face.
That would be me if Tim didn't keep control of the credit card. So,
Yeah.
alrighty, let's focus on what we're really here for. I really want to have a chat to Phil. So, Phil, I'm going to ask the first question, if that's all right. And I want to know, when did you get into running, and why?
I started when I was 16, so that gives you an idea how long I've been running. Been a long
Just
time.
a couple of years.
A couple of years. I was riding pony club at the Gold Coast, and my aunt suggested that I needed something to occupy my mind other than riding horses and get a bit of fitness together. So we lived at Ashmore Road at Southport, and I used to go for a little jog in the afternoon through the bush. It used to be all bushland, and now it's all Ashmore's all properties and houses and all sorts of things, but we had stables and everything there. And that's how I started. And then when I came back to Brisbane to live, I was a bit lost, and I ran into an old mate from Banyo High, and his wife's brother was a runner, and that group of blokes that I ran with back then, I still run with occasionally and see and go fishing with, and have. We had our 40th anniversary of living in a house together, not just recent, just a couple of weeks ago. So that's how I started, and I was always the one that got left behind. And you guys won't believe, but we ran in bare feet and Van volleys in those days, and we were regarded as quite unusual. People didn't really believe that runners, we were told to get off the road when regularly by people in that situation. The best story in that area is the coach we had at the time, bloke named Eric Bailey. His wife used to go and buy volleys on special at Myers in the city, and all the apprentices used to pay her off over a period of time, so we had running shoes to run in. So
wow.
So that was quite interesting, and that's when Tiger G9s came along, and we all ran Tiger G9s. So. And if you saw what Tiger G9s were,
not much to them.
Not much to them. And we ran marathons in those. So
an upper and a piece of rubber on the base.
Basically. And then somebody in South Africa decided it was time to put some rubber on the bottom, and so he cut a tire up and put on the bottom of them. So that's how it all started. Yeah, that's where I started from. So that was back in a long time ago. From then I just went from there to there, and spent a couple of years in New Zealand and met some very interesting characters over there. Bloke named John Walker, Arch Jelly. Ran into them one morning at a fun run at a park back here, and kept running.
Are you there?
Still running.
Still running? Excellent.
Still running, yeah. Sometimes you mightn't call it that. Yeah. So,
no, you're still beating me, Phil. Every time you go past me, you're still beating me, so it's all good.
It's all very good. Well, just over the years, you learn to cope with your running. I've learned that I can't run every day anymore, so I ride now as well. They conned me into a triathlon as an Ironman a couple of years ago, but I don't swim anymore. Swimming's not my idea of fun. But yeah, you just learn to cope, and the hardest thing I found is that you've got to learn to accept the fact that you're not fast anymore. That's the hardest thing. And I wasn't fast originally, but realistically, you ran faster than what I do now. That's for sure. That's the hardest part.
So you would have run quite a large number of events, I'm imagining, Phil. So what do you have a favourite and why?
Very hard, Tony. Very hard with what events that because I've organised and also running them. It's interesting. There's a race in New Zealand called Round the Bays. It used to be 12K. That was an incredibly great race. A lot of fun to run in. And someone asked me tonight, and I said, I think Sydney to Surf's one of the most enjoyable runs to run in. I've run it 20 odd times, and it's just been always fun to go and do. You haven't got to really worry about how fast you run, but it's just with 90,000 on the weekend, so it's a lot of people to run with.
Oh yes, that was interesting. I can tell you.
Yeah, years ago when it was there weren't any group starts. You had to be there, 2.5 hours beforehand to get a spot on the starting line up the front if you were lucky.
Jeez.
So it was, there was you couldn't go off to the toilet because someone would take your place really quickly. So it was a really interesting concept in that area. So. Other races, we've done Dopey. I did Dopey with Tim and Tara. That was a great couple of days, and I really enjoyed that atmosphere and the people there. Ran the 10K in Tokyo. That was incredible. Loch Ness was a real experience. Not used to the cold weather in the Loch Ness Marathon. Told everybody I wasn't cold when I'd finished, but you certainly were. It was 4 degrees or something when we finished, so it was bloody cold actually. So, but yeah, I don't know. I really don't have a favourite. Some of the events I've organised, I've got some favourites, but that's about it. Yeah.
Now, because I don't remember you guys in Dopey, because I also did Dopey the same year as Tara and Tim.
Oh yeah, we were there.
Yeah, they were there. They were on the same tour. They were Travelling Fit.
They were definitely there.
Yeah.
Yep. It was great fun. One of the races I didn't elect to make was, Illaroo. Out there at the Rock. That's been twice now, and if anyone asked me to go, I'd go again straight away. I wouldn't have any hesitation. It's one of those races that, I'd go back. I'd go back to Dopey, but I mean, in real terms, I'd go back to Illaroo. Yeah, so it wouldn't be fun. Be fun.
Excellent. So, Phil, what would be some of the more interesting places you've run in and why?
Scotland. Love Scotland. Absolutely love running in Scotland. A friend of ours are there at the moment, and they're in Edinburgh, and he's running. He was going to go for a walk around I forget what they call it now. There's a little hill outside of town, and it's a hill. It's a decent hill. And I said to him, well, I've run up it a couple of times, mate. So he sent me back a message. I'll have to try and run up it now, won't I? So he said that was a bit of a challenge for him to do it. But Loch Ness was a real experience running Loch Ness. I think that really was one of my 4 favourites. Yeah, so I think that was, and Dopey obviously is right up there.
So why was Loch Ness one of your favourite places to run?
Oh, I think Scotland. It's different. It's one of those, and the aura of the Loch Ness. The monster in the lake. And there is a monster of a hill in it, so don't ever think that it's a flat course there. Most of the course in the first 30K is uphill. You don't notice it until you drive around the car the next day and work out that yes, this was uphill. Wonder why the wind was blowing in your face and you were running uphill, and running along with a bloke from Scotland, and he said, now if you can run up this hill at about the halfway mark, and the hill was probably 1.5 to 2K, and quite not encouraging to run up, let's put it that way. But apparently if you can run up that, you can run to the finish. And consequently, I didn't run up it. So,
so you did run to the finish.
Slow day, the office, and the temperature change. But the aura of Scotland is I just like Scotland. It was just one of those places I really like going to. And I've been there twice now, and I'd go back again. So, but, I think the thought of the Loch Ness monster, and their T-shirt's brilliant. It's a shoe with the Loch Ness monster as a shoelace. That's the emblem. So that's the emblem for the short. I think I've still got the T-shirt somewhere in the cupboard. Yeah. So that's why I would go there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Now, Phil, I'm fascinated by the running shop. I think it's one of those dreams of all runners at one stage. They've all thought about, oh, I'd love to own a running shop. I can have all the latest gear and try it all on. Now, you were the owner of what we called the RunIn back in the day here in Brisbane. I remember it fondly as a kid around the streets there of Sanford, not Sanford Road, at Enoggera there for a while, and then you were in Stafford for a while. When did you start it, and what was the motivation behind it? But also, was it the first running shop in Brisbane at the time that was purposely for running?
Okay, well, I'll go back. I'll just run through the history of it.
Yep.
There was the RunIn, and there was another shop called Run On Down. Now, a bloke named Terry O'Donovan ran the Run On Down. It was a Nike specialist store.
Yep.
Nike was, Terry was a bit of a devil. He was supposed to have a retail outlet, but he had a little shop front in the middle of the Brisbane city, but it was never there, obviously, but so ran most things from home and that sort of situation. I was lucky enough to be working in the printing trade, felt a bit lost and didn't know really what to do. So I applied for a job at a place called Robinson's Sports Store. Now, some of the older listeners will understand where Robinson's came from. Robinson's was the sports store. That and Bill Brown's in Brisbane, they were the big sports stores. And, you know, if you wanted anything, you went to Robinson's basically to buy it. Guns, hurdles, shot puts, archery. It was the shop to go to. And they even, when they had it in Queen Street, it had tennis courts and basketball courts and bit like some of the shops around today. And one bloke by the name of David Hoey and Gerard Barrett. And most of us have heard Gerard Barrett. He comes from Bow Desert. They opened a shop on the south side over there, on the other side of Brisbane, Indooroopilly area, and they started the RunIn. That was their started. A few years later, I bought a franchise, and then a few years later, I bought the name of the business. So basically, that's where I came from. Then why I got into it, I just happened to fall into the right place at the right time. I was pretty rough around the edges, but I probably still am that way. And one of the guys, Brett Crew, who ran for Australia, came and saw me when I was working at Robinson's and said, why don't you buy a franchise? And we worked out a franchise deal. And as I say, that's how it started. And I opened a shop at Everton Park. They had one at Indooroopilly. We had one at on the other side of Brisbane somewhere as well. I can't remember. When I bought the business, we had 3 shops, and we cut it back to 2, and then we cut it back to 1. But basically, that's how I got into it. And that was, you know, we had 5 different locations in the Everton Park area over 40 years, which not too bad, I suppose. You know, some places got knocked down, some places are still there. So that's where I started from. We went from we had, I think, 15 brands of shoes at one stage in the shop, and cut it right back to 2 or 3 in the end, because obviously the good brands were doing better than the others, and we could see where we're heading in that area. And we had to go to bigger shops all the time because we were the starter. Terry and I were probably the beginning of the running, and running fraternity. And, you know, there was no podcast, there was no running groups. We started a running group 42 years ago, and it still happens every Wednesday night. It still happens. And a few of the people are originals, you know, so it still goes on in that area.
And I guess Tim and I both, when we got into running, we used to visit you quite frequently at the RunIn, and the wealth of knowledge that you've given us as well over the years has been invaluable. But I know that Tim and I have actually dreamed about owning a running store, and over the years, I'm sure you've witnessed some good and bad times. Is it as good as what we would think it would be, like to own a running store, or is it an endless, do you have endless supply of everything you want, is what pretty much the question is.
I'm still a kid in a candy store. I still am. I can't help it. We travelled to most unusual places, and I travelled to Dubai and found a running store in Dubai. You know, I tend to find them. I go looking for them. I'm terribly jealous of my friend sitting over here to my left, she met Bill Rogers in the Bill Rogers shop in Boston, and I'm still dirty about that because he was my running hero when I was coming through. So people like, yeah, look, yes, it is brilliant in that area where, and especially the era we went through was the era of the Bill Rogers and the Robert De Castellos and the new shoes and all the new concepts and all the new ideas. And the great thing was that we had a really great relationship with ASICS, and I still have, that they brought shoes to me that were never seen here in Australia and never would be seen. That I got to see prototypes. I got to try prototypes. I got to get samples that I could never dream of. And, all that sort of stuff was great fun. In this day and age, I wouldn't recommend anyone going into it because you're up against the big guys who have unlimited resources and buying power. And that's the biggest problem now, is that we had buying power, but it wasn't anything like what those guys can draw. And the internet's a big thing. I mean, really the biggest thing I've noticed is that, people know what sort of shoe they want. They go and buy it on the internet. They hardly go into the shops. I mean, I know that the shops do okay, but once those people get established and understand the internet, it disappears. And that's the hardest thing. And getting good advice is really the hardest thing about shoes in this day and age. I see it when I go out to Wildfire to visit and have a talk to those guys. I see that there's no expertise in selling shoes. They know how the shoes are built and everything like that and why they're built. But realistically, I had dinner with one of the ASICS guys the other day, and we know that 65% of the new shoes people shouldn't be wearing because they're just not suitable for people. They just don't work. They work up till a certain point, and then obviously your body tells you the rest of the story. Sorry, Tony, you going to say something? Yeah.
No, I tend to agree with you that the vast majority of the advice that people are getting it through YouTube influencers, and that the only time you tend to walk into a store nowadays is if you want to try on the latest and greatest shoe, and then give it a test run in the shop, and then almost the minute you leave the store, start looking for the best deal online. So it would be an incredibly challenging marketplace now for any running store, I would imagine, a specialist running store especially.
Yeah, I think, and that's been noticeable, with our moving on and, with the Wildfires of the world who sell so much online, it's and in training moving on, it's just the way it is, and there's not much we can do about that situation. Yes, I'm still a kid in a candy store. I still love going and looking. I still look. I still get samples sent to me. People laugh in the old days. Things like we used to have 8 brands in the shop. They would bring all their samples in a week to me, and we'd spend the weekend trying on shoes and looking at them. Tony, you are right. There's a number of different colours that are available and all the different shoes. And from what I hear from next year, there's going to be another 20 different models of shoes that come along that, they'll buy because the elite runners are wearing them or in that situation.
Very much so.
Really difficult.
So, Phil, let's move off shoes and talk about races, because Tara's said that you've owned and organised a number of races in the past. Share with us some of the events that you've done.
Okay. Well, Bribey Triathlon Series we've been running for it's 40 years up now, and I've been involved for about 38 of those years. So that's a pretty big accomplishment. We had a race called the Queensland Half Marathon, which ran up until this year. And the first time we ran that at Doomben, I think probably nearly 5,000 runners, which was a big field in those days in Brisbane. And my biggest accomplishment that morning was when we went back to the race site. And it sticks in my mind as you walk down the finishing chute of your own event and know that you've got 5,000 runners running and there's going to be 5,000 people using your finishing chute. And I walked down there by myself in the morning and felt pretty damn good, actually, and pretty satisfied with what I'd done to get it to that level. So I thought that's one of the races that I look back on and think I'm pretty proud of. I'm involved with the Hundy in Harvey Bay, 12 years as event director there. The schools triathlon championships, I've been doing that for over 20 years. So they keep dragging me back for some reason. I don't know what it is. But a lot of events. The Criterium Relay is one of my fun events, because we do that at the track, and the teams run 5-man, 6-man teams run for 5-man teams. Run for 90 minutes and see how far you can go. And we've had everybody from the running mums to Berts and all the top runners run, and it's a fun day. On Anzac afternoon, we honour the veterans and the returned soldiers, and it's a fun day. And I think we had 45 teams or something this year, and plus we had kids teams as well. So that's another little event that I've done. And one of my claims to fame, and no one ever talks about it, but is the first Bridge to Bay. First 2 Bridge to Bays were under my control. And I happened to say something to one of the editors of the paper, and he didn't like me after that. So I have a bad habit of voicing my opinion. So that was what happened in that area.
Phil, there's nothing wrong with voicing your opinion at all, but I agree, sometimes it gets me into trouble as well.
That's right. The thing called the Downtown Dash, we ran that for years in the city, and the city used to start at the top of Roma Street Gardens and run around the city. We had 5,000 in that a couple of times. That was a great race. Only 5.6k, but one of the hardest 5.6. Tim, you know about that one?
Yeah, up and down those hills in the city. Oh.
Yeah. The river run from the university into the city. That was another one of ours. I occasionally go through some paperwork and find some results from events and think, gee, I'd organised that one. So, my resume in that area is pretty extensive. World Masters Games, did the triathlon. We were supposed to have 350 and we had 1,250. So we swam in the river and rode around the city, closed up after Brisbane. And we had a great time in that one. That was great. One of the first times I worked for 48 hours straight without any sleep. That was I was a walking zombie at the end of that one. So there's lots of races, Tony. I just keep thinking of them as you ask me the question. It's really difficult.
It's more about which ones haven't you organised in Brisbane and southeast Queensland, I think.
Amazing, Phil. And just kind of leading on from that, and
my first marathon was the Brisbane Marathon in '79.
I think we're losing you again, Phil. Oh, we've got you back.
Yep, there we go. We're back.
Yeah, 8 laps of the Queensland Uni.
Oh, wow.
Didn't want to go out the last lap, but a couple of blokes dragged me around. 3:27 or something, yeah. So, and then I ran 3:19 at the Gold Coast the same year, the first Gold Coast in '79. So look, been involved in lots of stuff. There's a lot of stuff I've been involved in that probably no one ever knew that we were involved. But we were the go-to people. Terry O'Donovan used to put on some crazy events, ride and tie, from Sanford to Debra, where you rode your bike and jumped off and ran, and then the other bloke jumped on the bike and rode. So that was always good fun. We had some great events over the years. It's been involved in a lot.
Oh no, it definitely sounds like you've put on some amazing events. It'd be good to kind of get a further understanding, and for the listeners, about some of the challenges you face, like organising an event in terms of getting approvals, council permits and stuff like that. So it'd be good if you can explain to the listeners some of the difficulties about putting on a race, and why sometimes race prices are so high. Because sometimes people think, oh, they're just closing the roads. Surely it can't cost that much to close the road. So it'd be really good to understand a bit more about it from the organisational side of things.
It's a dangerous question, that one. I have some really strong opinions in that area. Look, event organising, I have a deal with people. If you came to me and said, look, I want to put on a fun run or I want to put on something, you get an hour with me for nothing. You buy me a cup of coffee. After an hour, you start to pay me. All right. So that's just to give you an idea of how, if I can't talk you out of it in an hour, we go. Right. So realistically, yes, look, this day and age, the permits, the road closures, the insurances, the websites, everything is now a lot more difficult. When we did the things like the Downtown Dash, we had a great rapport with the police. And in those days, you could get the police. Sometimes they donated their time. There were lots of events we ran around the Commonwealth Games and Olympics that we never paid for road closures. We never did any of that sort of stuff. But now you pay for every policeman on an hourly rate. It's something like $165 an hour you pay. So, realistically, you look at Gold Coast Marathon, they've got 360 police, I think they're involved in that race. So you can imagine what the bill is down there in that sort of situation. The other one is the traffic control companies. Now, this is a red light with me. I don't go any further than say that they are terribly expensive and they have the ear of the government, so therefore they charge what they like. And they have set rules and regulations that make it extremely difficult for the local school to put on a fun run and want to close half a street or just one street to help. And it's cost prohibitive in that sort of situation. So that's another little problem you have. Councils, we've done Bribey Triathlon for 38 years, for 40 years in the same park, and realistically, they still charge us a bond, which they've never had to claim on in 38 years or that I've been involved. So they still charge you a bond, and then now they charge you to hire the park. Some of the Brisbane City Council's not so bad with their hirees in that sort of situation. They, if you do it for a charity and the charity's involved, a lot of the time they don't charge you for the park. You might have to pay a bond, but that's about really the whole thing. Because I've done events from here to Cairns, every council's different. Every council has different priorities. Yes, you can get grants from the councils, but because you're a profit-making company, we're supposed to be a profit-making company, you run into problems. Then there's merchandise, and then there's medals, and then people say to me, how come the race is closed out? Well, two reasons is that yes, it probably have got to be safe on the course. We know the Gold Coast closed early because obviously to be safe on the course, it's not that way. But everybody orders their medals on last year's entries. So you don't want your medals arriving late for the event. And if you get them at the right price, you order earlier. Same with your T-shirts, same with your merchandise in general. It's all that way inclined. The good thing about New York, Tony, is that New Balance make all that gear and they flog it off in their DFO shops after the event. Most race directors don't have that ability. I was lucky because we had a shop, so we could actually have it in the shop as well. We moved quite a bit of gear and that sort of stuff. But if you go through my cupboards here, you'll find that there's a lot of race merchandise from our events. So that's where you start off with. Then you've got a website you got to get up and running. Someone's got to run your website. Every entry you put through on an online system now costs you anywhere between $2 and $7. Timing systems. The people want the splits, and yes, everybody wants their splits now. Everybody wants a split. In the old days, it was manual timing. We manual timed 5,000 people at the Downtown Dash. I think our success rate were only 8% that we didn't get times for. Sydney the Surf, I ran Sydney the Surf the first couple of times back when I was a younger man, and they missed my time. I ran 53:42, and my time didn't appear in the paper. So it's pretty sad sort of situation. But now you've got the timing situation where you've got chip timing splits, and every time you put a split out there on the course, a mat, it's another cost involved. It's not just $5,000 to time the event. It's $5,000 plus this plus that. If you want the big screen at the end, you want the barcode, everything goes up. We've noticed in event organising this year, or last season, sorry, for Bribey, between when we set our entry fees in July, August, by the time the March race came around, everything we got involved in the event was gone up 30%.
Whoa.
And that's across the board.
That's just
so
insane.
any of us in business or anyone who understands that sort of situation, it's really difficult to make money properly. And that's why a lot of events have disappeared because of that situation. You know, and it's very difficult to, you know, there's a race that used to run in Pelican Waters in Caloundra. The council have made it that difficult for the organisers. They've said, no, we're not doing it anymore. So,
and I don't think people appreciate what actually goes into organising an event like this. And I know for me, just hearing all this, like, you don't mind paying the costs for it.
Yes. Well, a few years ago when COVID came and we were still running the Bribey Tri Series, a couple of my friends who've done triathlons for 20 or 30 years, but they turn up, do the race, they came and worked at the event. So, you know, like we work to get the Bribey set up for 500 people. We start on Friday morning and finish on Sunday afternoon. So it's 3 days of building. You know, Gold Coast Marathon now starts 14 days before the race to build the site. So you've got to build the site, then you pull it down, and then it takes about 7 days to pull down. So, you know, realistically, and not only that, you're handling the emails from the people who don't read the entry form properly, or who Joe Blogs wants to change from so-and-so to so-and-so. And, you know, the in-depth, if you saw the emails I got tonight from a couple of people, you'd laugh. You laugh at them, but, you know, you've got to answer them, and someone's got to spend the time doing that, you know. And they wonder why there's no refunds or no refund policy. Well, you know, we run a refund policy on 7 days prior to the event. You know, some of the other event companies, there's no refunds. You don't have a choice. So realistically, you know, you can understand why there's no refund policy. You can pay an insurance now. I think it's, I think I looked the other day, I think it's $8 or $10 or something extra on your entry fee that you can get insurance that you'll get your money back. But you only get a percentage back. You don't get the full amount. So you know, and we're viewing the insurance per, if you're not a licensed athlete with triathlon, it's now $14, I think it is, to do a short course triathlon as a licensed athlete.
Yeah, because I once did. No, sorry, I was meant to do the Husky Super Sprint a few years ago, and I had to pay, I think it was like $5.50 or $8.50 for a day license. Needless to say, I didn't do the triathlon because it rained the day before and I wasn't going to ride on the road, but a different story. But really appreciate the insights into all the additional costs, and hopefully that's giving the listeners a better insight as to why race prices are so different and why some of them can be so expensive.
Yeah, but you know, the grants that they get for some of the bigger events, Noosa Tri, Gold Coast Marathon, they get grants from the government are quite substantial, but still the entry fees are quite high, and that's half the problem with it. That's why you get some of us cutting back on events, because we just can't afford the cost.
And I guess things like COVID didn't help in that, as you're saying, you've got a number of fixed costs that you're incurring through the course of the 12 months prior, or 6 months prior, or whatever it is, that are non-refundable. And then all of a sudden COVID hits or something like that hits, everyone thinks they're entitled to a refund because they're not racing the race, but you're still incurring costs as the race organizer. So it's that fine balance. So can fully understand how tough it would be.
One of the events we ran was the Rainbow Beach Triathlon, and the morning of the race, they pulled a lockdown. We were set up ready to take registrations, and people were in town to do the race in Rainbow Beach, and they said, that's it. Can't do it. No event.
Yep.
So, you know, imagine we tried to refund, we tried to transfer, we tried all sorts of things with people, but it was difficult. We lost substantial money in that situation. So, and that's the problem you run into. You're trying to cover yourself in all those areas, and that's the biggest problem. And then you've got to pay the people that work for you. And all the volunteers that come all get some form of remuneration. People say they're volunteers, but they're really, it's the Bribey Island Surf Club who come, and we pay them to do the surf, do their work. So it's still paying people out of your budget.
Yeah. Now, I know we're running short on time, Phil, so I'm probably going to ask the last question here. I know you've been heavily involved in the Gold Coast Marathon for a number of years. I know you've had a number of roles there. You're still, even this year, on the little moped running up and down managing a section there of the course. I also understand that you're integral for coming up with the Gold Coast double. I'm presuming that's from the Dopey experience you had, but can you tell me a little bit about your experience with the Gold Coast Marathon, your involvement there, but also the Gold Coast double concept, which is pretty unique here in Australia?
Yeah, look, I started, as I said, I ran the first one in 79. I ran my PB in 82. And I probably ran a half after that. Then I ended up in registration. I ended up being a spotter for the PA guys. In those days, it was a spotter. You looked through your binoculars and saw number 52 coming up the road and looked it up in the list of entries and called it out, right? And that was where we went from there. Then I finally ended up, somehow or other, I ended up on the other end of the mic where I was the bloke doing all the talking. And then a few years ago, we came back from Dopey and we had some meetings with some of the hierarchy, and I made a suggestion about perhaps you should do a double event on it would be good for the event. Nothing seemed to happen for a couple of years, and then suddenly this new miracle idea of the double event arrived. I got some smirks from some of the hierarchy in the Gold Coast that suggested that, when I sort of, that's an interesting concept, and they laughed and gave me that look that you get when people know what you're talking about. And so suddenly we had the double. And I won't claim that I put it in their head, I put it in their heads, but I think, they sent some people to Dopey to have a look as well. I think that the concept worked very well for them, and it's gone very well. It can only get better.
They sent some people to do Dopey. I like that. Can I be one of those people?
Oh, yeah, there's a couple of people who've been to Tokyo, and I've been to a couple of, I think some of them went to Paris this year as well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind being on that committee as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic concept, the Gold Coast Double. Tara and I have done all three of them, and I'm looking forward to doing a fourth one next year, and ultimately, if I can keep it going, become a Gold Coast Gold Coast Double legend ultimately in 10 years' time.
Yeah. Well, what happened too, of course, I became untrendy on the microphone. So, and we were told years ago that, we had to get apprentices involved. And of course, I got Joel Murray involved, and now Joel Murray's the boss. So, and I've been relegated to moped duties. So,
I don't
it's
mind
very
you
handy
there, Phil, especially as I'm struggling along and you come up beside me and you're like, "Come on, Tara, keep going," and I'm like, "Come on, get on the back of this thing," but you never let me get on there. So
I quite enjoy being out on the course. It's quite good fun, and I use my experience and help a lot. Last year, I actually took some shoes off people and relaced them for them so they could actually finish the race. So accomplish something while you're sitting out there on the course. Yeah. So, and it's a weekend on the Gold Coast, and I see a lot of friends, a lot of people. Great lot of people I know down there. So it's great fun.
You're definitely a good motivation to do Tim and I, that's for sure. So we appreciate you out on course. So Phil, I'm going to hand it over to Tony because Tony always asks our guests what is called the Fast Six. So Tony, over to you for our Fast Six.
All right. So Phil, what this is 6 quick questions and hopefully 6 quick answers. And if you answer them in the way of the of Tim and Tara, you normally get a cheer and a response as you go. So, all right.
Right.
Are you ready to go?
Yep.
All right. Podcasts or music?
Music.
Best running advice ever given to you?
Be consistent.
What advice would you give to someone starting out?
Take it really slowly. Take your time.
Uphill or downhill?
Uphill, actually.
Yes.
Oh, no.
And there's the noise from the hill. So, gels or blocks?
Neither.
Okay. Favorite shoes to run in?
If I didn't say ASIC, I'd be in trouble, wouldn't I? No, ASICs probably. I've run in ASICs for a long time. Yeah, I've run in Nikes. I've run in Nikes. I've run in Mizunos. I've run in most brands, but not ASICs. Always I come back to. Yeah. Sure.
So, how do you fuel yourself if gels or blocks aren't your thing?
Cordial, natural foods. I snakes, jelly beans.
Okay.
Tony, you got to remember when I started in '79, there was no gels, there was no anything. Basically, we got a sponge that was not wet most of the time, and then we were told not to use them because you're not sure where they've been. And then ice water was a lot of the stuff. Bit of water. I was once asked by a nutritionist, how much did I drink in my marathon when I ran my PB, and I said I probably had a glass and a half, maybe. That was about it. And she was quite amazed. But I'm a great believer in hydration leading into the event. I do struggle with my stomach over the years. Tara knows, has seen me and experienced this. But I just find that the blocks I can get away with, but at some days I can't. And I don't know what it is. But I've been reading a fair bit about natural foods lately, trying to get some ideas on what to, try different natural stuff. Someone was saying that, grapes and all that sort of thing are great for you now too. But I just found that, cordial was always my go-to. When I was struggling at the end of races, someone would have a cordial on the side of the road and hand it to me and I'd drink it. And my long runs, I used to always find a bottle on the side of the road with someone would leave for me, and it was a cordial in it. Sugar doesn't. I think sugar's good for me. So yeah. So realistically, that's where I am, mate. Yeah.
Still learning. Good to hear.
Yes, I'm trying to learn. When I did Ironman, they were pretty cranky with me because I didn't really do the food thing properly. So I struggled at the end.
That would be tough doing an Ironman just with snakes and glucose and cordial. You've got to eat something in that sort of 9-10 hours.
Oh, Vegemite sandwiches.
Veggie sandwiches. There you go.
Yeah, veggie sandwiches would be great. Yeah, as I said. But
that's your salt.
Oh, wow.
Not a lot of carbs. I guess the sandwich is the bread itself is the carbs, but
no crust.
Phil and I have both got the same stomach sort of issues, unfortunately, where we're very still learning. It doesn't matter how many marathons we've done, we're still learning on what we can and can't put into our stomachs. So before we finish up, we always get a tip from Tim. So, Tim, what is your tip for this week in relation to what Phil's been talking about?
Yeah, so thanks, Tara. As you've heard from Phil, it is possible to have longevity in the sport of running. We know so many people that come into running, they go really hard, really fast. They're focused on times. They're focused on getting a PB. They're focused on using the latest and greatest running gear and constantly changing things up, that after a few years in the sport, they don't enjoy it anymore. They're not in it for the long term and they disappear out of the sport. So as you've heard from Phil, it's about having fun. It's about, looking for like-minded people and listening to your body and not always taking it seriously, but also getting interested in other things to do with the sport as well, like getting involved with events, whether it's volunteering or organizing or helping out. It may be getting involved in, helping other runners find the right equipment or shoes or whatever for themselves. So, and sharing that information, be like what we're doing here on this podcast. So, for me, my aim in my life is to keep running for many, 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 many more years to come. It's part of my life now, and it's something that I can't ever see that won't be part of my life. So for me to continue on, it's not about those fast times. It's not about having the latest and greatest gear. It's about, encouraging others, being part of the community and really being there for the longevity of it all, which comes about through all those things. So I guess that's my tip this week, is to really experience the whole sport and not just be so focused all the time on fast times and PBs, because if that's what you focus on solely, you're going to get disappointed as you get older and you can't do those fast times. So that's my tip.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Tim. Alrighty. So before this episode ends up, we'll go to Lucia to talk about what's happening for next week.
Excellent. Thanks, Tara. Next week is an exciting one. We have a very special guest coming on next week, Alice Backey. Alice, I do apologise if I have said your surname wrong, Alice is one of the co-founders of the app for runners, which is which has a number of Pilates workouts, rehab. So it's a really good, and they have all different types of programs as well, on demand. But I noticed Alice is doing something a little bit quirky for the Melbourne Marathon. She's set herself a challenge, which I don't want to go into too much yet, but you guys think I do crazy things. This one's up there. So Alice is going to come on and talk about Pilates, why it's so instrumental for runners. And I forgot to mention, Alice is also she trains some of the elite Aussie marathoners. Jen Gregson, Jess. So we'll be asking her a whole bunch of different things, but looking forward to her explaining the challenge a bit more. So yeah, watch this space next week. It's going to be a good one, guys.
Excellent.
And I believe you're hosting for the first time next week, Lucia.
Yes. So everyone has to be nice to me next week.
There might be a few little quirky things in the run sheet just to see if you're on top of your game, Lucia.
So guys, who knows? Next week could be my last one.
No.
Lucia, if they keep letting me on, they'll let you on. Don't stress. Okay. So thanks for that. That wraps up our episode for tonight anyway. But before we finish, I'd really like to say thank you to you, Phil. Thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and for you to give up some of your time tonight. I know that you're a busy man, so really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. It's good fun. I'll definitely listen to more podcasts, Tony. So
and I know that we have a good fan with Angela as well, so that's always a good one, so that we can keep her happy as well. But also like to thank our marathon mates for joining me tonight. So thanks very much, Tony, Tim, and Lucia. And as usual, we will do this all again next week. But I'd like to thank all of our listeners as well, joining in and listening to us. If you like this episode, you can like it and leave some comments if you would like. And you can leave some encouraging words for Phil on how good he is at organising these events and for such a long time, and for keeping up his running for such a long time. As usual, video of this episode will be available at Spotify and YouTube. Audio will be on Apple and Amazon and all the other popular podcast platforms. Remember, every step forward is a victory. Lace up, hit the road, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Flying RuNR. Until then, happy running.
Happy running.